Good morning to all of you. Welcome to the fifth and last day of the December board meeting. It's a pleasure to have you here after this on the last day of this very intense week. I hope that you all had a good rest after yesterday's bowling activity. We could see some talents that we did not know that we have, and you also could see some talents that some people don't have, and that you probably didn't know. I hope you have an award for me as the worst bowling player of the board. I think it was a very good activity, and I enjoyed it a lot. In spite of that. So today we still have some important things ahead of us, namely 2 approvals to decide upon. But before we start with the agenda, I will give the floor to Ken for some administrative issues.
Not so much administrative, Chair Gabriela, but really just 2 matters in connection with the agenda. One is the approval of the board minutes from the September sessions. Well, just a public session. We'll take the approval of the executive session minutes during the executive session later this afternoon. But in relation to the September public session minutes, we have received some comments early this morning, so we've not had a chance to process them. So I would suggest that the board consider the changes and approve the minutes next Wednesday during the virtual session, if that's okay with everyone. And secondly, Workstream 1 has circulated 3 sections with some revisions yesterday afternoon for the board's consideration. Time permitting this morning before lunchtime, Workstream 1 would like about half an hour or so to enable Mark, as chair of Workstream 1, to walk the board through some of those changes in response to the board discussion earlier this week. So if that would be a bit of the program for today. And then we can move to the agendas, Gabriela, after you have announced any additional matters.
Thank you very much, Ken. And indeed, I'd like to address one topic before we go to the agenda, which is the composition of the working groups and task forces. As you will remember, on Monday, we asked for expressions of interest for the new working group on the firm's culture and governance, and also to the EIOC and technology working groups. So I'm happy to announce that the new working group on firm culture and governance will be composed by 4 board members. 4 board members with different backgrounds and different experiences, which we need in this case as in any other cases, and that the group will be composed by China, who has kindly accepted to chair this group, Hector, Rania, and Rich. Sorry, I'm a bit slow this morning. So again, Chana, Hector, Rich, and Rania are going to be the 4 members of this group. As you can see, knowing them, different experiences, backgrounds, and etc., which we need in this case. I think we managed to get a perfectly balanced composition. Thank you very much for expressing your intention of being part of this group. To those who have also applied but were not included yet, or for the time being in this group, I'm also very grateful. But as you can imagine, and you know, we have to make options and find the best solutions in terms of the diversity in the groups and the availability and etc. So this is congratulations to the new group members. Thank you, Chana, for your availability to chair this group, and we wish you a very good work. And the board, I'm sure, will be very happy to follow the work of this group and to provide many comments, suggestions, and insights, because it's going to be really a very exciting journey with this group. By the way, I don't know if you realize that the PCAOB approved the project. Well, I don't know if it project a probe on the 6 biggest firms to investigate and analyze their culture. So. It seems that there was a conference this week, in New York, organized by, I don't know if it was in New York, AICPA, where culture was also the topic, the most important topic. So I think that we are, this makes us very confident that we are really touching upon the topic, which is the topic of the moment. So thank you very much. And this is the composition of the new working group. The EIOC and technology groups did not receive any expressions of interest. So we will leave them as they are and wait for the new board members to join. Maybe some of them will be interested in joining these working groups. With respect to the sustainability task force, even if Jens is not going to be formally a board member or a member of this group as a board member, as Jens has very kindly agreed to continue working with us, well, in a different capacity, but with all his knowledge and all his diplomacy, we decided not to make any changes in the composition of the task force. The task force is already big enough as a task force. Many people with board members, TAs, and staff. It could be a little bit disruptive to make changes at this stage, moving people from one side to the other or whatever. So we think that the work stream 1 is robust enough in terms of capacity and knowledge. So there won't be any changes in this respect. And I think that with this, I covered the changes and the no changes in working groups and task forces. I'm also happy to announce that Sadia Adam will join the planning committee as well. Under invitation. Jens is unfortunately going to leave the planning committee, so Sadia will join us and has kindly accepted to take this responsibility on her as well. With this, I think that we are moving forward towards having almost all the board members involved and with responsibilities. It's impossible to have them all at the same time, but this is the journey. Inclusiveness and everybody on board, but of course recognizing the capacities, the quality, and the contribution of each one of the board members, which unfortunately is very relevant around the table. So if there are no questions in this respect, well, of course, I would not need to say that because it goes without saying, but Laurie will be still the vice chair because she was appointed for 2 years as vice chair, so no changes in that respect. But thank you, Laurie, for taking this role last year and for keeping it. Just wanted to make this clear as well in case there were any questions. Ken, Anna, am I missing anything? So thank you very much to all of you for your your wonderful dedication and contribution in your different capacities and roles at the board. And let's now move to the first topic in the agenda this morning, which is the final discussion and hopefully approval of the tax planning project. I will reserve my comments to the end of this session, and we'll give the floor to Jens Paul to present the last version after the accommodating the board comments of the tax planning project. Jens, please.
Thank you, Gabriella, and thank you for this introduction. And Carla and I, we will now go with you through part 380 document. We want to explain where we are proposing final changes, and thank you to everyone who have sent us last-minute comments and observations, and we will all include them here. And afterwards, we will look at 280 and then to the document of the conforming changes. So these 3 documents we will present to you, and Carla will now lead us through the changes, and if there are any issues, we can discuss it, and we have enough time to find proper solutions. Carla?
Thank you, Jens. So the members would have received the turnaround paper that was shared on Thursday morning, incorporating all the feedback that we received during the board and also from offline comments as well. Thank you very much for that. The task force met and considered those comments. The session this morning will go through the substantive ones where we'll explain the changes and the basis on which the task force landed. Feel free to raise your points again if you have any further thoughts in the revisions, but otherwise I will go through the document where the changes have been made. So if you follow through to the first change would be in 389A1, and it's about the responsibility of management and those charged with governance. There was a request to look at the example of submitting the client's tax return, as it is perceived that the responsibility of those charged with governance can sometimes be delegated onto another party. So the task force proposed that we revise the wording to say authorizing the submission of the client's tax return and dealing with relevant tax authorities in a timely manner. But subsequent to sharing the turnaround, we also received feedback that the sentence may not read as well in terms of conveying the intent of the task force. So perhaps where we should have landed is the wording ensuring submission of client's tax return. But I'll pause here to see if our members have anything else to add.
Thank you. Jens and Carla. Luigi, please.
Thank you. No, I'm fine with authorizing the submission. What it seems to me is not flowing, or it is not flowing probably in the right ways when in this way dealing seem not to be linked to authorizing, because basically in the tax compliance there are activities that are material submit administrative activity to submit and administrative activities of dealing without taking any decision, without having any responsibilities at all. So I think that what it is true for submission is also true for dealing. So I wonder whether it is possible to clarify that the responsibility of submitting and dealing is of the management, but the let's say operational act could also be dealt by others, which has no responsibility.
I think the thinking is we have in common. It's about this responsibility, which is a management responsibility, and the heading means responsibilities of management. I think we could perhaps change it, but for me, it's crystal clear that if you read the heading, we are talking about the responsibilities of management. So, but I'm looking for views and looking to the task force members whether there are any suggestions. It's a wording issue. We are clear on the substance. Sanjeev?
I think I agree with you, Jens. So here we're just talking about the responsibilities of the management and not what the PA's responsibilities are. I absolutely agree with you. PA has a different role to play. But here, if we change something on those lines, then I think the question will be or can be that is the right place to do those changes, because this is only on the responsibilities of the management or those charged with governance. So that's the only thing, nothing else. Your point is well taken. PA has a different responsibility to work within those norms, etc. But I think this may not be the right place to make that change.
And perhaps we can clarify in the basis of conclusion that this doesn't prevent from delegating some of the actual doing, but the final responsibility is still with management. So I think that is the thinking.
Thank you, Jens. Felicia.
Thank you, Chair. I think using ensuring is probably much better because this is the responsibility of management and it follows within the context of if you look at the text, it is indicating ensuring throughout. So I think ensuring is better than authorizing the submission because management's responsibility is to ensure that everything is done right, not authorizing. So I think ensuring could come out to be the proper wording. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. Ken, please.
Thank you, Chair Gabriela. I would offer the board a very simple editorial suggestion, which I think, to my mind, this is just a drafting matter. I don't think the board is disagreeing on the principle here. Felicia, thank you for your comment. I think the task force is very clear that it is a matter of authorizing, so I would keep authorizing. Where's the word gone? Okay, authorizing it. That's not the issue. The discussion is on the matter of dealing, and I think Luigi has a fair point that readers might perceive that actually management is dealing with the nitty-gritty issues that might be raised. To my mind, this is a very simple editorial, and you could say, well, keep the first part of it and say ensuring that matters raised by the relevant tax authorities are addressed in a timely manner, or ensuring that any matters raised by the relevant tax authorities are addressed in a timely manner. That still keeps the responsibility with management and still keeps the thought about dealing with issues or questions or any matters raised by the tax authority in a timely manner.
I see.
Yeah, I'll probably add that,
Happiness.
ensuring that any matters are addressed in a timely manner.
Perfect. Moving on to the next example. It is in paragraph 380.12A3. Now, this is also linked to the example that we had in related services. The members requested that we provide further clarification on the linkage between the example that you see in front of you and some of the example that's in related services. And the thought process is that when a PA is engaged to rectify or provide advice on a tax planning arrangement as requested by client that perhaps has been disputed by the tax authorities, so to be able to come up to a position where there is a credible basis, that is a type of related service. So 380.12A3 has been revised to make that linkage to the related service example above, as in 386A1 and A2. So we'll look to the members if the added wording clarifies the position to make sure that readers read that when it comes to rectifying tax planning arrangement, it is a type of related service.
Thank you, Carla. Comments? No comments?
Okay. Moving on to the next paragraph. As members recall, we had quite a few discussion in 380.19A1 on example that deals with self-interest threat when a PA is in possession of confidential information based on the role that they undertaken previously and the ability for them to use that information for other clients and giving them a perceived advantage of having access to that confidential information. So the task force went back and revised the wording as you see in front of you to convey that the threat arises, the self-interest threat arises not by accessing the confidential information, that it will be possessing that information gives the PA a advantage when they come to advising other clients. So I'll pause here to see if members have any comments in the example that is presented. Sorry, in the revised wording that's presented in the example.
Thank you, Carla. Luigi, please.
Yeah, my point is that it seems to me that at least I'm not able to see the action here because the simple possession of information that may be available, it is not per se the source of a specific risk, or it is too far from being the source of a specific risk. Probably the risk is when there is the intent to advise or there is an actual action to advise the client on this matter, because these obviously would be directly linked to the risk. So this was my comment.
Thank you. Carla?
When the task force was drafting the example, we thought that the phrase would be valuable in advising other clients would denote that intent that we're trying to convey. And I think that's the position that you've also querying about. So I wonder perhaps if a simple solution would be valuable if the PA is advising other clients, so that makes it an active action.
Thank you, Gabriela. Carl, I don't know that this is going to make any difference in terms of what this is already saying. To my mind, this bullet point is describing the circumstance. It's not describing the action. In fact, as we address describing the action, it's almost nearing the point of causing a breach of the code. The threat is really arising from the particular circumstance. And as we all know, when the code describes threats, it's about describing the interests, relationships, or circumstances. So it's the nature of the circumstances that gives rise to the threat, as opposed to the PA undertaking an action that actually is going to cause a breach of the code. So if you were to read the other bullet points, for example, they are describing circumstances in which those different types of threats or might be created in this case. So for example, if you were to read the next bullet point, this is where the PA accepts a fee that might be perceived as being excessive, but this is not suggesting that the PA, by the mere fact that the fee is excessive, is undertaking an action that will cause a PA to breach the code. So it is a description of the circumstance, and that is no different from what we are dealing with here. It is the circumstances, the PA being in possession of confidential information that in and of itself creates that risk or that threat that might, that information might be used to give an advantage or however we've articulated the bullet point. So I think as long as we are clear that we are describing the circumstance as opposed to the action that is going to lead to a breach of the code.
Thank you, Ken. Luigi.
I'm still thinking. It seems to me that it is really far from the potential point where a threat may arise, because even in the other case, you received fee for a tax that you already provided, or you agreed fees for a service that you already are going to provide, and here there is an action. There you are in possession of information, but there is no action. So this was, let's say, the type of reasoning which is concerning me. But let's say, if the other are fine with that, I will surrender.
No, we're gonna rescue you, Luigi. I was maybe, I mean, if it helps, we could would be valuable to the PA, because that then signals that it is the PA who would potentially be taking the action in terms of utilizing the confidential information. I mean, it's a bit implicit here, but and maybe that picks up Carla's wording. But if that just brings that additional level of clarity, that might help you. Carla, if you could add the PA and then the board can read that.
Okay, thank you very much, Ken, for the suggestion. Does the board agree with Oh, Rich, sorry.
Yes, I'm a little confused now. I didn't originally have a point on this, but in a network, someone might have worked with a governmental agency on a confidential basis, and another member firm in the network might be giving advice in the general area, but have no clue that something was done confidentially because confidentiality had been maintained. So does that create a threat that you're supposed to assess?
No, it might create.
I don't see how what we said here, maybe I'm not understanding what the point of this is.
I think that sorry.
No,
you're correct. It might create a threat depending upon the circumstances, and that's what we're saying is it might create a threat. So you'd have to evaluate those circumstances. I think if one side doesn't know what the other side's doing, it's hard to say a threat is created. So
yeah.
And if I may maybe emphasize this point, it is about might create. It's not really saying it will be created. So I think we have to read the word very carefully. And the code, in fact, this is not the only place where the code says threats might be created. The entirety of the code is all about really sensitizing PAs to circumstances that might create or give rise to threats.
Yeah, we need to be sensitive on that point, though, because I understand what you're saying and I agree. But the way the phrase might create was used in the NAS for pies gives the impression that that phrase is at a higher, it imposes almost a thou shalt not type concept, because we said there, if it might create a self-review threat, then you can't do it, even if it doesn't currently. And I think we need to be careful, that people understand the difference between what we said there and when we use this in many places throughout the code.
Sorry, Galen, please.
Is this intended to be very focused on the Australian situation? And if it is, I would hope in the explanatory memorandum that there would be some specifics as to this particular item, because I do agree with the points that have just been raised. That, I mean, it's a little unclear just reading this as it is what we're actually trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Galen. Paul, please.
Thank you. I think just going to the sentiments being expressed, I wonder whether the suggestion that we're changing the would be into is, so that's what crosses the line in terms of whether there's a value or not being allocated can only occur where the two sides know what each other have done and therefore can use it or potentially use it. Would that solve that kind of extremity of suggestion that we're talking about?
Thank you for the suggestion, Paul. Well, we have more comments, but I think that I'm going to give the floor to, can I continue? Okay. Christelle, please.
I was just building up on Rich's point on, I see a different on a potential self-review threat, which is linked to the fact that inevitably you're going to do the audit. So if you do an NAS, inevitably you will encounter the self-review threat. While here, the self-interest threat is only going to happen, or the self-interest problem is only going to happen if you use your information before it is available for all types of clients and public, if I may say so. So there is a difference in terms of the level, of the reality of probability of the threat arriving. So I am all right here if it's clear that it's an individual, that when he bridges, the code is when he uses the information while it is not available for others to have a particular commercial advantage or whatever, or other kind of a personal advantage of this. So I'm all right with how it is now.
Because it speaks to confidential information. So if it's confidential, it has not been made available. Mark.
I worry that the revised text is too precise and too specific. And actually what we are is we're setting a principles-based code. And for what it's worth, I prefer the language as it was before, because I think this is so narrow in its focus. Although it does allow you to say in the explanatory memorandum, we've written this to deal with the case in Australia. actually isn't the purpose of writing this not to deal with the Australia case, but to put material in the code to prevent this sort of thing happening again, be it in Australia or any other jurisdiction. So my preference would be to go back to where we were before, but I realise that that may not be entirely welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Luigi, do you still want to add something? Okay, thank you. Then Jens.
So we have now different views, and I think we want to not only to address the Australian situation, but it's about having confidential information and the possibility of using this. And I think it's a different situation, and I fully agree with Christelle in the situation of the self-review threat, which is, in my understanding, in the NAS section, an exemption where we said if in a PI situation, a self-review might occur, the perception, and that's the issue in the NAS, the perception is so, or the threat is so high that there is no safeguard, or you can't do an action to limit it or to reduce it to an acceptable level. And that's a very specific situation of the self-review threat in itself. Here we are in the self-interest. So that's why I think this concept of might and PI situation, even though we have no differentiation here between PI and non-PI, I think it's not, it's important to understand the difference, and we can elaborate this, but I think it's also technically correct. I will give you another example where we had long-lasting discussion in fees that the fact that the accountant is getting the fee from the client in an audit situation, that there might be a threat. So it is said, even though we are saying in the end, it's nothing against that in the current situation, the auditor is paid by the client. But we want to make aware that this situation might lead to a threat. And I think similarly here, we're just describing a situation where we have on the one side confidential information, and on the other side, the possibility of advising your client on that specific issue. We're not saying that that each and every accountant will misuse this information, but it's a situation where the accountant should be aware that he is acting properly and either not doing this, or someone else in the firm should do it who is not involved in that specific advice. So, and all this spectrum of activities or actions are possible. So I think it is a very, very careful description of a situation which occurred in practice. Perhaps normally we wouldn't have thought about this case because it's a little bit away from the normal thinking, and sometimes you're thinking only teachers or professors at university are fictionalizing a case, but it happened, and that's why we thought it's appropriate to put it in.
And if I may make one comment, it happened, but it's not impossible that it happens again and many times, because we know that the use of accountants by governments to advise them is a common, regular, systematic practice to give them the expertise and the understanding of things that they don't have. So this is really a situation that we know that happened. We are a little bit obsessed by the case that we know and that we've been speaking about, but the risk of this happening very many times is huge in very many other situations and countries and etc. So even being sensitive to Mark's comment that this is a little bit concrete, I think that if we go back to the former text, and I would not oppose to that, it's still concrete. Everybody reads it in a way that it's clear what is there. But I don't think that we are addressing one case. We are addressing a situation that's a problem that we know that happened, but may happen very many times. Sanjeev, please.
Just a brief comment, Deborah, to what you said. I think it happens pretty regularly. I've seen that the governments all over would consult the lawyers, the accountants. And I think since this is in public domain for the last so many years, I think it is appropriate for us to address it in a principled way that this is something which is one is aware about it, shouldn't happen, and that is why this code kind of gives a responsibility on a principle to say, well, be aware of this. That's the point.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Andy.
This is obviously a very thoughtful conversation, and I think we had already said that we're going to address this in the explanatory memorandum. I mean, this entire paragraph is bullet points of examples, so we could actually strike the entire paragraph and just not have examples, but that's not very helpful. So I think as an example, it is a correct example. Could it be another correct example? Yes, it could be another correct example, but I think we've committed to work on the explanatory memorandum and to understand the context for which this provides an example of the self-interest. Right.
Okay, thanks for that, Andy. Any other comments? So, Jens.
So at this point, I'll look around to board that will keep the wording for this example as presented as it is, and further explanation in the basis of conclusion document.
Let me just confirm that everybody's acceptably comfortable with this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We'll move along to the next one. It's the deletion of the phrase off-the-shelf package from paragraph 318.19A2. As previously members said, the phrase is a little bit unclear, didn't quite understand what off-the-shelf package meant. So the task was proposing that we delete the phrase altogether from the example. And I'll pause if members have any comments on the revision.
Luigi, please.
Thank you. I think that previously the example had the benefit to be clear, or at least to be very clear about the situation we would like to tackle. Now with this deletion, it seems less clear in my view to a normal reader who has no previous knowledge of what we were saying. So I wonder whether it is possible to include a concept of standard, I'm using words as they are, of course, but concept like standard tax planning arrangement or marketed to many clients with no or little modification. Because in this way, it could also imply that, say, a response that it is the only response that we can provide to a client, it falls into this example.
I think that is possible. We just have to draft now in a proper way. So we had pre-packed, I think was the original term. Then this was criticized and we changed to off the shelf. And
Sorry.
I think, Rich, you...
Yeah, no, I had a comment on this area. I had no idea what off the shelf means. And I asked some tax professionals and they couldn't define what it was either. I thought what it says here is what Luigi just said. It's a tax planning arrangement with little modification for the client specific circumstances. Is that not what you were after? Something where you just kind of do it repeatedly? And if not, then let's get the right words in. But I guess the question is, what are we intending to address here then if it's not covered by the words that are here?
Andy, please.
Yeah, I heard it's just the idiomatic expression of off the shelf. Off the shelf means used in other clients. So I thought Luigi was, I think it's implicit, as Rich just said, that it was used for others, but with just so we have to deal with it, whether the tax planning arrangement used for other clients with little or no modification for this client specific circumstances. I'm drafting on the fly, but the notion of used for other clients. And I think that's what you're getting at.
Used for market. Yeah. The concept of the off-the-shelf, prepackaged, whatever it is, was A PA is marketing a product for many clients without or with little modification. And this is clear. It is in this way, I'm not sure it is clear, because if someone asks me about what the law is requiring and the law is clear, I would respond in the same way to many clients, and this is not here.
Thank you, Luigi.
So it's commonly used is what we're saying? Or
Yes.
commonly marketed?
Non-customized.
Yeah, I get the non-customized.
Yeah.
I thought we had that in there.
Okay, Hector, please.
What about pre-existing? Because that's the idea, is something that you have prepared in advance and you are just deploying it. So I don't know, to me, it makes sense to refer to something that is pre-existing and used before for other clients.
Thank you, Hector. Paul, please.
Thank you. If anything, I'm sort of leaning with Rich in terms of, isn't the concern the absence of responsiveness to client needs and the nature of the inputs being given? So where you make no modification, whether you've used it or not, it's not fit for purpose. And that's where the threats are arising. And that seems to be very well captured in what's written there.
Thank you, Paul. Chana, please.
Okay, maybe this is a drafting suggestion, whether it's a tax planning arrangement previously used for multiple clients with little modification for this client specific circumstances.
Okay, Ken, please.
That works for me. I was going to come up with a different suggestion, but that conveys, that's works, yeah. If it works, it works. But I do agree with Luigi's, absolutely, I do agree with Luigi's reaction here, that, that's why we have to be careful whenever we are deleting words that we don't inadvertently create new sort of ambiguity, etc.
No, thank you. So we have now the wording. Perhaps we can, whether it is a tax planning arrangement previously used for multiple clients with a little bit of modification for this client specific, the client specific circumstances. I'm looking around.
If please.
I think Hector made that point, or with little or no modification. You may be repeating it as it is or with some modification. So can we use the word with little or no modification? I mean, if it is, I'm fine with this also, but that's another thought which I think Paul had proposed or Hector had proposed.
No.
Perhaps we can drop previously, as Laurie is indicating, to be more crispy, is redundant. Used for used means previously, so it's even clear. Used for multiple clients.
If anything, my concern, the multiple. Does it need to be multiple? Yeah. It's other clients. It's not fit for purpose. It's used for someone else. You can't replicate something that's not fit to this client. So it's any other. Even one is okay. You don't need to do it 10 times for it to be bad.
Okay, so Jens or Carla, can you please read aloud what is written now and see if everybody agrees with this?
Factors that are relevant in evaluating threat of such a level of such threats include whether it is a tax planning arrangement used for other clients with little modification for the client's specific circumstances.
Not yet. Luigi, please.
Well, if we stay with the original intent, others could mean one, while pre-packaged off the shelf and so on is more linked to multiple. So I would prefer the idea that this is something that we are, not we, that the PA is marketing for many multiple clients And it is used as a standard to be replicated on the others.
Well, everyone, I don't know, Paul, you still want to?
If it's just anxiety, once you use multiple, what is multiple? Is it 1? Is it 3? Is it 10? You start getting into a very, just drop the multiple. If it's not for them, it's not fit.
I think multiple is used in other places in the code as well.
Yeah.
And it's just an example.
Yeah, it is. I would advise the board not to debate the meaning of the English language. Multiple doesn't mean one. It certainly means more than one.
Sorry, Hector.
Chair, what about Sanjeev's recommendation of little or no? To me, it made a lot of sense. I'm not if I'm
No, I would not add no, because that would mean that you use the name of the previous client and you use the same name. You at least need to change the name.
Should we keep it like it is now?
I know you go to multiple. Right?
Multiple or other? Multiple means more than one, other means more than one. I see no real difference, but
yeah. No, other clients.
Yes, clients. It doesn't say another client.
Yes,
it says
clients.
other clients.
So I see I'm a non-enabled speaker. I see no difference.
But it's an example. Is the example wrong? Or could it be worded differently? I mean, these are all important comments that if the example is misinterpreted as meaning this is the only course of action that's naughty, then I think we'd have a trouble, but it is listed as an example. I mean, indeed, I think these are all other wordings of perfectly fine examples, but is this example wrong?
China, please.
I think from experience, what we have found with these pre-packages, there are multiple clients. This is the practical reality. So on that basis, I think multiple is the right word here.
I'm not disagreeing.
I can't disagree with the chair.
Oh. They're both okay. Okay. Multiple is an example. Okay, thank you.
On behalf of Task Force, we're very thankful members are very awake and full of rigor this morning, but clearly we are very close to the finishing line, and this is an example of a really good product that we're aiming for. So very thankful for this discussion. So next one, I think that concludes section 380, but before we move on to 280, I'd like to pause here to see if other members have anything else to raise in section 380. Once we move on to the next one, we cannot come back to 380. No. Of course we can.
No comments to 380. Move.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen. Section 280, which relates to responsibility of PAIBs, agenda item 3J, which was also shared on Thursday with the turnaround text. I'd like to clarify that the changes we have in 280 largely reflects the changes that we made in 380. So I'll quickly go through the text and point out where I think it will be a substantial change to what you've seen previously would be the addition of the example that we just discussed on the self-interest thread. Previously, we didn't have this example in 280 19A1. And further deliberation by the task force that we could actually modify the example to be applicable in the case of PAIBs when they've been involved in advising tax policies for a government agency. This is a real life example as well that could happen. We felt that it is necessary to reflect this example in 280 as well. So I'll pause here to see if members have any reaction to the wording and the intent of the task force. Mind you, we just discussed the wording in 380, so I hope there's no further changes in the wording itself.
Thank you, Carla. Any comments? No comments.
Thank you. I think that's substantial change in this section. Obviously staff will reflect the changes that we put through in 380 as well. But I like to also raise the point about 280.19A4. You see a markup and this bullet point. It was a missed opportunity when we had to when we made the change in 380. Previously, we didn't reflect this example. So the markup you see in front of it is to align with the wording in section 380. So that concludes the significant revision in 280. And I'll pause it to see if members have any other comments in the other paragraphs in this section.
Any comments? Last opportunity.
Thank you, Chair. So if I may, we'll go through the last document, which is the conforming amendments. This was shared as part of the package that was posted to the board, posted in advance of the board. Like to point out that we did not manage to discuss this on Monday, and this is the text that was exposed to the market. And the only change that the task force is proposing is in paragraph 321.3A1, what you see in front of you. Previously, we had the markup showing application of laws and regulations such as accounting, auditing, reporting, etc. On further deliberation, the task force is of the view that we might have inadvertently enhanced the scope. So we would like to be more specific and conclude with the deletion of the reference to laws and regulations such as, and to be specific that it is about the tax laws and regulation. I'll pause here to see if members have any comments on the revision since exposure.
Thank you, Carla. Rich, please.
Yeah, this is from the extent code, and the extent code covers second opinions on matters that are now appear to be left out because it doesn't reference laws and regulations. Previously, it said such as accounting, auditing, reporting, or other standards or principles. Why would we just not say accounting, auditing, reporting, or we'll put tax first, tax, comma, accounting, auditing, instead of limiting it to tax laws and regulations? So in other words, if the accounting is specified by regulation, it should be included in here if you're going to give a second opinion on it, is what I'm getting at. I think this change inadvertently limits the scope of the paragraph.
So, Jens?
I think that's a point we can accept. I'm looking to the task force.
Yeah.
See, I think it's okay.
So laws and regulations, that's deleted, right? So
yes,
it is
as tax
accounting, yeah.
I think that's consistent.
Yeah.
The language is consistent.
Yeah.
We are very much driven by tax laws and regulation because tax planning is on tax laws and regulation, but I think it works. Tax, accounting, auditing, reporting. So
I was suggesting leaving laws and regulations such as, and then start with tax. No?
No, I think
No,
that's,
this is way too broad.
Yes.
If I can, in the exposure draft, no. If I could remind the board what went out in the exposure draft, which clearly the board approved. It read a second opinion on the application of laws and regulations, comma, such as tax laws and regulations, comma, and accounting, auditing, reporting over standards or principles. So really the parenthesis is about an example of laws and regulations, but really the broader concept is laws and regulations. So I don't believe that we'll receive any significant concerns with the conforming changes on exposure. So I would suggest to the board that we stay with the original wording in the ED.
No, just Ken, I think when we sort of discussed it, the concern was when laws and regulations, whether we are sort of, going to the area of lawyers. And that's why we thought, okay, tax laws and regulations is something that an accountant can speak about. But I like the suggestion that we just say the application and then get rid of laws and regulations. And it's more like, so it was originally accounting, auditing, reporting, and tax is also a matter an accountant can give second opinions rather than having the laws and regulations. So I thought initially Rich was saying to delete laws and regulations.
Yeah, now that I follow what Ken is saying, I would just start with tax.
Yeah.
Well, if it's tax, then I'm not sure there are tax standards per se. Is this the intent?
Oh yeah,
Tax
I mean, tax
standards or
standards might
principles.
not be there all over the world. Yes, that's true.
On the other hand, it is very well within a PA's competencies to advise on the application of tax laws and regulations.
Yeah, okay.
This is not a province of lawyers only.
Yeah.
So back to the original.
Well, I would narrow it to tax laws and regulations. So that's not, that we're turning PAs into lawyers, as it were. Yeah, the application, I would delete laws and regulations and just say the application of tax laws and regulations, comma, and accounting, etc.
so as proposed, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're coming back to that, what we proposed. Okay. Happy.
It's not wrong.
Everybody's happy?
Yeah.
Happiness.
Okay.
Okay.
The enthusiasm. Thank you. Does members have any other comments on the conforming amendments at this stage? I think.
Okay, we can now move on to approval.
To the
Thank you for all your comments. I think that was a good discussion, and thank you to the task force, to Carla and Ken for this tremendous support. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens, and task force and staff, Carla and Ken, supporting the task force. This was an incredible effort and an incredible journey to get here. We will now approve the standards. Well, I'll leave my comments to after the approval, but I also wanted to thank the board members for this very last stretch in analyzing and addressing the last changes made to the text, which of course also mean a great effort from the team and from the task force to come back with the document in such a short time frame. Thank you to all of you, and I'm now going to pass to Ken for the process.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Gabriela. I just noticed on the clock that there are, well, in fact, we just struck the hour. In fact, the clocks are not aligned. We have 15 seconds to approve the document before we hit 11 a.m. 10 seconds. Only joking. Let me run through the due process procedures, which are very important. First of all, let me confirm to the board in my capacity as the technical director for IESBA that the board has followed due process up until this December board meeting in developing the proposed provisions, which have been finalized at this meeting. And I would also like to confirm to the board that throughout the course of this meeting, the board has followed due process in terms of being, especially relative to the task force, being transparent in terms of the issues that have been discussed. Let me turn to Jens to confirm whether, in your view, Jens, the task force has brought to the board's attention all significant matters that have been discussed in the task force.
Yes, we have brought up every and each aspect of this huge item.
Thank you. And let me also ask you to confirm, Jens, whether you and the task force are of the view that there is a need for further consultation on the document.
No, there's no need for further consultation.
Thank you. The board has received a full analysis of the responses to the exposure draft. All the comment letters are available on the website. Is there any matter in the responses that stakeholders have submitted on the exposure draft that any board member believes ought to be discussed before the board is asked to approve the document? Nope, saying none. Very well. In that case, I will ask if the board is clear that it is ready to take a vote on this final document. This is his final pronouncement. Is there any board member who's abstaining from the vote? Any abstentions? No. Is there any board member who's voting against approving the document as a final pronouncement? And who is voting to approve the document as a final pronouncement? 17, 18. We have unanimous approval, Ms. Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Ken. I know that we only have 15 seconds, but I'll take you 1 minute more because I think that we really need to celebrate these moments. And there are many reasons here to celebrate. These have been, I don't know how long was the period, but I think it was slightly more than 2 years, 2 years and a half or something that this journey started at this board. And it faced some challenges, as I had already opportunity to highlight very many times. But the commitment of this board to integrity and to ethics and to the making sure that there is an ethics framework for tax planning was enough to overcome all those difficulties and obstacles. And what we are approving today, what has been just approved today, it's not only a project, it's not only a bureaucratic exercise, it's really something that translates our commitment as a board to the principles of integrity, of ethical conduct, and also, and that is also important to stress, something which is setting the course of the IESBA as a board. And this is not less of an important thing. This is not a tick in the box, a box to be checked. It's a critical step in solidifying the position of this of the IESBA as an organization, as standing for a responsible and ethical steward of behaviors, financial matters, etc. And it's important that going forward, when these standards will be implemented, used, and etc., that people and companies, users understand that this is not an impediment to success, and this is something that we should be stressing to the outside world all the time. This is not less success for the companies or for the users or for whoever. It's really a catalyst for sustainable growth and sustainable value. Our stakeholders and the community that we are serving will certainly be grateful for this contribution, even if some of them may not understand how much it changes in the very first moment. And it changes. This is the first ever baseline of ethical norms, ethical standards for tax planning, and I'm sure, and I think we are sure, this will have the ability of changing behaviors in this space, and that's what we need to do. It's to change the behaviors. Now, is it gonna happen on the very first minute? No, just like in all other areas, it's gonna be a journey. It's gonna take time. Those who want to breach the laws or the principles will always do it. This is not a magic wand against wrong behavior, against wrongdoing, etc. This is really that aims at helping the professionals, all professionals, even those beyond the profession, and this is also about expanding the scope of the code, may use to provide sustainable advice and sustainable services to the companies. So I'm really grateful to all those who were involved along the journey, and the dedication to the work, those who have contributed to this successful result that we are celebrating here today. Just as a conclusion of this, and this is not the last day, this is really the first day of a new journey. This is not a procedural step. This is really a statement of the values of this organization as an ethical board. And this is also a testament to our resilience as a board, our commitment, our assertiveness in following some paths and achieving some objectives. Now it's time to move forward for the break, of course, which is, by the way, very short today, but also to move forward with the knowledge of our decisions made here and shaping the IESBA legacy for the generations to come, because it's really what's happening here. Thank you very much to all those who, in one way or the other, contributed to this result today. Thank you and congratulations to the board. Ken, please.
Thank you. Yes, just two quick matters, and really just for the record, I'd be remiss, and it is my bad. I should have asked the board also to confirm that there's no need for re-exposure. So I know I'm not expecting that anybody will be asking for re-exposure, but let me just confirm for the record: is any board member who believes the document needs to be re-exposed? Very good. And I see a huge sigh of relief from Jens. Yeah, thank you, Jens.
Thank you very much.
And on the matter of effective date, Jens, if you could remind the board again that as to when the task force's recommendation.
The task force recommendation is after the 30th of June 2025, and early adoption is permissible.
Okay, so now we will break for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. So we will be back at, depending on the clock that we are using. Now they are reconciled now. We'll be back at 11:28. No, 18. Sorry, 18. I'm sorry, but we really have to start. We still have a few things to do today, and we have to be conscious of time. I apologize for the short break that we had, but you will have time to rest this evening. So, without any other comments, to save time, I'm going to give the floor to Laurie. What we are going to do now is to address the final version of the exposure draft on experts. I'm very grateful to the task force and to the staff for the quick turnaround of the document so that we were made available with these documents and had the possibility of getting to an approval today. Laurie, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriella, and thank all of you for comments during the session we had on Tuesday. And after, we got a lot of good points in. So this morning, we're going to go through a few key things. We're going to jump right into a page turn to see where changes have been made since the version that was distributed prior to the board meeting. And that's most important. And after hopefully the exposure draft is finalized, we're going to spend a few minutes on some additional items and details around the exposure process in period. So without wasting any further time, I'm going to turn to Cam, and we're going to start to page turn through the document because that's the most important thing we have to do right now.
And so we start again with the glossary. And so there's been no change in terms of the definition of expertise. However, in terms of the definition for a external expert, we've added the term engagement leader here, and that's really to incorporate the term used in Part 5 for sustainability assurance engagements, the engagement leader. And in the italics here, it's to align with the general phraseology used in the code requirements and application material that replaces the original term relevant ethical requirements, which is typically used when we refer to the ISIS. So any comments? Okay. Then I will move on to the proposed section 390. Or actually first the revisions to 320, extant code 320. So you'll recall from our discussion on Tuesday that the extant paragraphs 320.10 and 10A1 are withdrawn. That's essentially those paragraphs on using the work of an expert. So they're withdrawn. In terms of the other considerations, 320.11A2, you can see from the markup here, we've added external there, just make sure, since our section 390 addresses external experts. So we've added that consistency. Then moving on to the proposed new section 390. I'm just scrolling down the page, but you'll see no change here. The first change here is 390.4A2, and that's the action that might be a safeguard to address a self-interest threat if APA doesn't have sufficient expertise, is to use the work of an external expert for their service. And we've added who has the competence, capabilities, and objectivity to deliver the work needed for such service. And that's really to reflect the fact that it's not really a safeguard if you use an incompetent expert or incapable or not objective. In terms of the last bullet point here in the list of examples of where an external expert might be used in accordance with responsive to suggestion to use IT systems instead of cybersecurity systems, we've edited the bullet point as such. So assessment and evaluation of IT systems, comma, including those related to cybersecurity. And this language is consistent with those in the tech revisions as well and the self-review threat. Okay. Then in terms of section 390.4A4, sub-bullet B, the task force did note the discussion with respect to for example, some data providers or information providers such as Standards and Poor, the people behind doing such evaluations might be experts in their own right. However, for the purposes of this section, they are not experts engaged by the PA to perform a bespoke piece of work. And so therefore, since this lead-in already says this section does not apply to A and B, we've removed this sentence, the second sentence here, which says such individuals and organizations are not experts. Okay. All right. Then moving on now to R390.5. In little b here, you see the yellow highlight here. And the reason that's highlighted yellow is because this is a slight editorial after the task force has circulated the papers to the board on, I believe it was Wednesday. And the reason for that is in the circulated papers, we had proposed deleting provision of. However, after reflection, we've now reinstated the provision of because we believe it makes it very clear that it's not a negotiable process, that what types of information a external expert might provide to the PA. Essentially, the PA needs to be provided specific information to meet all the objectivity evaluation as set out in the section. Okay. And then the next change here is in paragraph 390.6A2, and that's the second last bullet. As we discussed on Tuesday already, this bullet initially was in the list of, was in the section in relation to evaluating potential threats to the fundamental principles to the PA, to the professional accountant itself. There was a comment to consider whether or not this bullet, whether the external expert can explain their work, is that actually better suited in the evaluation of an external expert's competence, with the rebuttal presumption that if the external expert cannot actually explain their work, are they really competent? The task force was responsive to that suggestion, and so therefore we've moved the bullet up to this paragraph over here. There's been some, in the yellow highlights, you'll see there's been some additional editorials just to make sure that it reads as good as possible. So it reads whether the external expert can explain their work, comma, including the inputs, assumptions, and methodologies used, full stop. So that's the change that's been made. All right, and then the next bullet here, responsive to a comment on Tuesday that the task force could use a different term rather than track record, which might be a little colloquial. The task force has proposed using history instead, and that should be better understood. All right. Then in paragraph 390.6A4, in the first bullet, this was wording suggested by an IESBA member, really to reflect the fact that in some jurisdictions, those that issue ethics standards are not necessarily always professional bodies. There could be regulators, national standard setters, etc. So this wording it was suggested by the board member. And then you'll see that the next change here, starting with the second bullet, whenever we refer to the external experts organization, we really wanted to be very specific and very clear about which level of the external experts organization we are referring to. And so therefore we, in front of all the external experts organization, we added the external experts employing organization. And that's just to make it very clear, because in some external experts organizations, these could be quite large multinational companies with many legal entities. So to avoid confusion, we've added employing in front of organization for all those terms. So you'll see this change made throughout the document. Okay, moving on now to R390.8, and these are the, if you recall, all the sub-bullets A to M. These are all the independence attributes that a PA must assess for external experts used in audits and other assurance. And so for sub-bullet E, in relation to a close business relationship, we've added if any, and that's to reference where the financial interest is referenced. So it's not always the case that there definitely is a financial interest, and that's aligned with 520 as well in the extant code. In the next sub-bullet G, we've added also a consideration of how long the external expert and their employing organization have been associated with the entity, and that's added in response to an IESBA member's suggestion also to consider their organization. The task force agreed with that. And in sub-bullet H2, there's also been a edit here, and that's really to reflect that the PA wants to know any information about the external expert in terms of any positions that were held or previously held by the external expert and without a time limit. And that's really to better understand the totality of the situation. The PA can obtain this information, evaluate it, exercise professional judgment, and evaluate and determine the external expert's objectivity. The next change then is editorial in R390.9, and this was a suggestion from my IESBA board member to really move these words here to the sentence above, where you can see, so it's clearer. Another editorial here in R390.10, the change from or to and the and is really to align with the wording that's used in R390.8, the period covered by the audit or assurance report and the engagement period. So it's consistent now. And then moving on, we have in paragraph 390.11A2, you'll see some yellow highlights here, and the yellow highlight really came, as I explained earlier, subsequent to the circulation of these papers to the board. And that was, as the task force reflected on the wording that you see below that's been struck out, does not undermine the intended purpose of the PA in using the work of an external expert. The task force, for better clarity, has replaced that phrase with what you see above. So just to read it, the information about interest relationships or circumstances between an external expert or their employing organization and the client might be obtained from inquiry of the client, if the circumstances of the engagement permit disclosure of the use of the external expert to the client. And really, this is to address situations where, for example, an external expert might be engaged for forensic purposes, really to investigate the client, and the circumstances do not permit such disclosure. So we felt that would better reflect the intent for better clarity. Okay, and then in terms of the next changes, advocacy threat. So in this bullet here, you'll see change towards, at the end of the sentence, it's potentially advantaging or disadvantaging the client, and that's responsive really to an IESBA member's suggestion that conclusions can either be beneficial or not beneficial to the client. So we've now made that very clear. In terms of familiarity threat, we went back, reviewed it, and this is the new example of a familiarity threat. A professional accountant has a close personal relationship with the external expert. So we felt that better reflects the familiarity. Okay, a slight editorial here in the third bullet, the nature of the professional service for which the external expert's work is intended to be used. Okay, and then in this sub-bullet 5, as I explained earlier, this bullet was now moved up to the CCO evaluation competency. All right, and then now moving on, we are in the last phase, editorial here in 390.17A2, change from as to so for clarity. And we are at the end of the document. Any comments?
Sorry, Cam, you think you went very quick in the last editorial. Could you just pause
here
for a few seconds so we can read that?
Yeah.
Rania, I see your tent card up.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm just looking at the addition to section 5390.682.
5390.682. So are you looking in part 5?
No, I'm where you added this bullet, whether the external expert can explain the inputs, assumptions.
Right,
Yeah.
okay, yep.
Methodology.
This one here, yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so my question is, I'm trying to understand this. So if we're evaluating the competence of the external expert, I'm assuming that we are doing this at the beginning of the engagement, yeah? And then we're talking about them being able to explain the inputs, I understand, assumptions, I understand, methodologies too, but conclusions, I mean.
Conclusions has been removed. In the yellow highlight, that's a strikeout. So it's, and methodologies used, full stop.
Okay, because it's in my draft, yeah, it's not.
Yeah, that's why the yellow highlight represents just additional changes since this version circulated. So you're right, that yellow highlight, that it struck out conclusions. Thank you.
Good, thanks. Anybody else? Going once, going twice? Sold.
Oh, well, I moved on to part 2. Okay. Okay, so no comments on part 3. So now we're on part 2, proposed section 29. First, we start off with the section 220 extant code. As you can see, there's been no change from what was circulated on what we discussed on Tuesday. And then in proposed section 290, really the edits here, the track changes reflect what we just went through in proposed 390. So unless there's a difference, I'm gonna scroll through, okay? So this change here in the sentence about the safeguard and having the competence, capabilities, and objectivity, that's aligned with part 3. This last bullet point, example of IT systems, including cybersecurity, aligned with part 3. Again, this deletion aligned with part 3. So really, I'm going to be saying the same thing. I'm scrolling down. This was the bullet point that we just discussed, whether the external expert can explain their work, including inputs, assumptions, and the methodologies used. So that, again, aligns with part 3. Change from track recorded history. And I'm scrolling down to the document. Again, the changes in advocacy threat, familiarity threats align with part 3. Scrolling down again, changes in the evaluating threats list, same with part 3. Moving down, the editorial that we mentioned in the emerging field as to 2, same as part 3, and we're at the end of the document. Any comments? Okay. All right, so the last one is 4E, and that's the equivalent part 5. So again, these changes are the same as in part 3. So I will scroll through the document, or maybe I'll scroll through the document, but please, if you have comments, feel free to raise them at this point. And we are almost at the end of the document. Are there any comments on the equivalent part 5? No? Okay, back to you, Lori. Oh, just one thing, sorry. On Tuesday, we did present, in the posted papers, we did have an agenda item 4F, and that was proposed consequential amendments. For clarity, and as I mentioned in the email to the board and to IESBA participants, we are no longer proposing consequential amendments to remove knowledge or skills when used in conjunction with expertise. And that is because, as Rich did explain on Tuesday, that use in the context of where it is in the extant code, that has a broader meaning, right? Rather than just knowledge or skills in a particular field. So again, repeat, we are no longer, the task force is not proposing any consequential amendments. So back to you, Laurie.
Okay, great. Thanks, Cam. Well done. And thanks everyone for your comments. So I'm going to hand over to Ken to take us through the vote process on this document as an exposure draft. So Ken, over to you.
Thank you very much, Laurie. And this is going to be relatively straightforward. The board is asked to vote on an exposure draft. So this is a document that will go out on public consultation. It is not the final standard. This is the board authorizing the document to be out for public exposure so that stakeholders have an opportunity to comment on it, on the proposals, and the board can then further reflect on the input in order to finalize the standard next year. So with that, I would ask if there is any board member who's abstaining from the vote. Seeing none. Any board member who's voting against issuing the document for exposure? Do not see anyone. And who is voting for issuing the document for exposure? 18. Wonderful. Unanimous approval. Maria, I'll turn it over for the exposure period.
Yep. So great, thank you. And thank all of you for all of your comments and work and throughout this period in reading. In particular, thank you to, I think, the task force, Sadia, Luigi, Andy, Sanjeev, Ken, who's as always Superman Ken in everywhere, and most importantly, Cam, who's touched every bit of this. So we're really looking forward to starting the exposure process, because that's where we really get to take and listen to feedback from the public and all of our stakeholders. Very important process. So we're going to spend just a few minutes talking through what that proposed exposure process is going to look like. The exposure draft will be released alongside the sustainability exposure draft. The task force is recommending a 90-day comment period, and that will be staggered with the comment period of the sustainability ED, so that jurisdictions can submit their comment letters without a bottleneck deadline of both appearing at the same time. I think the sustainability ED is like 100 days, right? It's a little bit longer, so not much, but a little bit. So 90-day period. This is relatively much shorter, so that should be adequate, we think, for an exposure period. So Cam is going to take us through a little bit of, we've started to put some thoughts about what will be in the explanatory memorandum. A lot of work to do on this. Obviously, this is at a very high level right now. Thoughts welcome on this part of our discussion here as we start to formulate where we want to go. So Cam, over to you to sort of run through what our thoughts are right at this moment.
Thanks, Laurie. So these are some of the matters we'll include in the EM. That's not all inclusive. It's just some of the items that we've touched upon during this week and from advanced comments and other comments in Q4. So the schematic, we'll definitely be including a diagram, flowchart within the EM, just to explain the different types of experts, how to differentiate them, and which part of the code applies. And then we do think that's a really important piece of this puzzle. And to the extent possible, we'll also be including very specific real life examples to make it easier for everyone. Okay, and in terms of the discussion on data and other providers and whether or not they are experts in their own right, or whether experts in that fit into our proposed 390 or proposed 290, that will be explained as well in the explanatory memorandum. The other thing is the evaluation of CCO. So this single bullet point here carries a lot of weight. We really do want to explain in the EM that the criticality of exercising professional judgment when you are performing this evaluation process, right? There's a list of factors, and in particular for the audit and other assurance, there's factors A to M, right? So you need to obtain all the information, evaluate it, meaning exercise professional judgment, and weigh it against all the specific facts and circumstances of your particular case. But this is why this is a principles-based code. So we'll explain that in the EM. And then the discussion on the term using or relying on an external expert's work, and what happens if there happens to be two contradictory pieces of work from an expert, even though they both meet CCO. We'll be including discussion on that in the EM. Conflicts of interest will also be highlighting what this actually could include in the EM. So for example, could include lawsuits and etc. Now this is quite important. This is the prohibition to use the work of an external expert if the external expert is concluded to be not objective, not competent, or not capable, right? We sort of just stepping back a bit and to our current status quo, ISA 620, the auditing standards, so they do have a provision that requires the PA to evaluate the expert's CCO. However, it is silent on what are the consequences of this evaluation. Okay, just want to make that clear. What it does provide for, however, is that it does have a substantial number of provisions on evaluating the adequacy of the expert's work. And if the expert's work is not adequate for its purpose, it provides what the PA can do. For example, it can perform additional procedures. For example, it can agree with the expert to do additional work or whatnot. Okay, but this is all in relation to the adequacy of the external expert's work rather than the external expert's CCO. And so I just wanted to highlight this because the prohibition that propose the section 390 and 290 have introduced is really raising the bar of the public interest and setting an expectation that external experts use must be objective if their work is to be used. The task force did consider, and we'll be explaining this in the EM, whether or not to accommodate for situations where obviously there might be a lack of experts in some jurisdictions, or potentially there might be experts who do not necessarily meet the CCO evaluation at this point in time. Whether or not to accommodate some sort of qualification in this prohibition. But again, reflecting on the public interest expectations, the heightened need for external experts to be objective, the task force is not lowering this bar or this threshold, and this will be explained in the EM very clearly. Okay. I mean, this is what we have at this moment. Again, it's not all inclusive. And bearing in mind the comments yesterday, we'll be trying to keep the EM succinct, 15 pages, if less. You know, we don't have 200 pages of, so yeah, less than 15 pages. I see Rania.
Hi, Rania.
So I just have a question. So, I mean, you remember my comment about the issue of objectivity, although I certainly appreciate, I mean, the position that the task force has taken on this. I mean, I can see it. I mean, it's not, I don't disagree with it. It was just a practical issue. But now my question is, given the audit board's position on this, does that create any lack of alignment? So that's my question.
So the audit board does have in their SWP does have a project to align with the use of experts projects amendments in due course once this is finalized. So they're aware of what we're doing. And this alignment, this importance of alignment, they're aware of. That's why they have their project in their SWP to begin once we finalize.
I'm assuming now that we're going to expose, we will see what
exactly
the public has to say.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sorry, as we work through the EM, we'll obviously be taking comments on that. And I'm sure as we flesh that out and get into the detail, there will be a lot in particular around some of the details of what these experts look like and do in the sustainability space, because that's a little bit complex and that will link very directly into the work that Mark's work stream is doing right now. So okay, so next steps. The EM will be circulated, as we mentioned, in conjunction with the sustainability exposure draft, or the exposure draft will be circulated in conjunction with sustainability. Closing date for the comments should be by the end of April, at least is what we're planning now. ED responses for the June board meeting, so we'll be going through those. What we hear back, and hopefully we'll get a robust response on this because it's important. And then at the September board meeting, we'll be looking at the significant ED comments with the IESBA Stakeholder Advisory Group, and full review of those issues and responses and first read and amendment post-exposure that we're proposing at the September board meeting. So that will be extremely important. Then more work on it for the board comments during the period following the September board meeting, with the goal that the final IESBA approval of the final pronouncement to take place 1 year from now at the December 2024 board meeting, and then a rollout and implementation support. So that's that. Any questions? We'll all be very busy with exposure draft comments, I think, over the coming year. All right. So thank you, everyone. Feels like a good Friday. Oh, Begonia, sorry, I didn't see you. Sorry.
Sorry, I didn't.
Okay.
Well, I would like to say a few words about this and perhaps the prior approval as well, because he didn't say anything. I don't know if I do it now or later. Okay, now? Okay. So, I mean, I think it's been a really productive meeting. It hasn't finished yet because you still have these virtual sessions next week and the executive session next. So it's not finished, but in any case, it's been quite a productive meeting. I congratulate the board for achieving these things. The other day, you approved the strategic work. Next, you approved the tax planning project, which is quite a relevant project. I didn't say anything. It's not because I don't think it's important. It's quite important. The PIOB is very pleased to see that there are some ethical standards for public accountants doing this tax planning advice. So really pleased that this is going to happen. And well, I think that it's been really very interesting to see how the board has been so carefully looking at the wording this morning in order to avoid problems in the interpretation of the examples, but nothing to say, really good. And about this last ED, well, I hope it will be appearing in April, as you suggested. I have had the opportunity to talk to Laurie and Cam this morning, and I already said my comments about our doubts about the external experts. I hope that within the explanatory memorandum, these things will be clear, because it's important not only that the PIOB understand, but the users, the stakeholders understand what external experts mean, why internal is not covered, where are the differences between the independence for one group or the other. So I hope that this will be clear, but in any case, you will see what the stakeholders think after the consultation. So this is the first step. And in any case, I just want to repeat it's been a good meeting. You will close it later, but for me, it's been really a fantastic event. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Begonia, for your final comments on the two approvals. And thank you very much. Of course, I need to thank the Laurie, very in particular, the task force and the staff for achieving this. I will again stress that this project started in terms of reflection and work later than the sustainability one. It was a little bit unexpected, and then they had to deal with some existential doubts about how to deal with the independence within the code, and this also shows the creativity that was needed and achieved to get out with a solution without losing any kind of quality and high level requirements, but going there where we wanted to be, taking another route. So thank you for your incredible work, all of you, and we'll see what the future will bring us. And congratulations for this approval. We are running very quickly to the end of this meeting, but we still have some topics that we have to address. As Ken has said at the start of the meeting, work stream 1 needs a few minutes with us, half an hour before we break. So, sorry? You don't? No, okay, whatever it is, a few minutes from us. So I'm going to give the floor to Mark, thanking them for the work that they have been doing during this week. Mark, please.
Thank you, Gabriella. So really, I just wanted to take a few minutes because when we talked about the turnaround the other day, we talked about our proposal to move forward with a new section of the code. So effectively, I'd said that previously we had section 5405, 5406, and what we'd actually done is instead sort of reworked our thinking to say where the auditor or assurance provider of another component is under direction, supervision and review, that would now be subject to one section, 5405, and Sylvia sent round the text the other night. Where you've got work that's being carried out within that group reporting entity and it's not within direction, supervision and review, it's now subject to 5406. The advantage then for 5406 is that any references that were previously in there to work being carried out in the value chain now comes out of section 5406, therefore making it shorter and therefore making it focused on just one area. And then what you'll have seen is a new section of text 5407, which is covering the performance or use of assurance work at a value chain entity. And what we've sought to do is provide one section that covers the value chain, makes no differentiation about whether or not it's direction, supervision and review or not. It recognizes in there that the assurance provider, the sustainability assurance provider, may want to do work themselves, so it still covers that. But I think principally in responding to the feedback from the board, we've also recognized that where the sustainability assurance provider wants to use assurance provided within the value chain, effectively there is now only one sort of requirement, and that requirement is to say, is that provider independent in accordance with section 5 of the code? Now, for the avoidance of doubt and really to reflect the discussion that we had within the board the other day, we've also confirmed within the application material the fact that meeting that requirement can be met through a statement of independence in a report that might be provided by someone offering assurance on information relevant to the value chain. So you'll see that within the document at 54074A1, which now says for the purposes of meeting the requirement in 5407.4, the firm may rely on a statement of independence in the Sustainability Assurance Practitioner's Report on the sustainability assurance work performed. So effectively that now confirms the fact that it is a single requirement and gets away from the concern that I think a number of board members were worried about, that we were providing something within the code that was going to be potentially onerous and also potentially difficult to deliver. So that I think the key consideration that we just wanted to draw to the board's attention is now we have this new section 5407, and within that there is, where someone wants to use the work relating to the supply chain, a very much more focused and streamlined process that is now there to be used. So you've got the text that Sylvia sent round, but I just thought it was really worth drawing attention to that. And then you'll remember the other day that we talked through 3 diagrams looking at the 3 scenarios. These sections now reflect what we've put within those 3 diagrams. Anything? So therefore being slightly more efficient than 30 minutes, but Laurie, please.
So, and Mark, and my apologies because this section, you know that I struggled going through it, but I think it's super important. I want to thank the task force for really spending time on this because I think it's moving directionally, sort of what would be satisfying. 5,700. So is the same, because that's actually outside the component, right? That's right. I just want to make sure I understand where that is.
So we discussed at length 5,700 as well. At the moment, there are no changes to the text on 5700, but what we propose to do in the explanatory memorandum is target a particular question to ask stakeholders, will 5700 provide a proportionate and effective way of mitigating any threats that relate to the value chain in this respect, and actually ask a question about whether or not it's needed.
So we're not going to have the language about, or does it somehow come in through this about yeah, that's why I'm a little confused.
The language in respect of
The
what, Laurie?
language about being able to rely on these independence statements.
So it's two slightly different things. So where the sustainability assurance provider is going to use the work of someone providing assurance in the value chain, they follow 5407. That is the single section that covers it. 5700 is effectively what we did is we put together 5700 as a section that considers any wider independence issues relating to the value chain.
Yep.
And so that is still the case, but we intend to ask a specific question focused on it within the consultation.
So 5407 would include suppliers outside the component group.
So it will be anything in the value chain, yes.
Okay. All right,
But that's really one of the things that we need to do in crafting the explanatory memorandum as well is we really have to re-emphasize for the purposes of our stakeholders that when we're talking about reporting on the value chain, it is only material items from the value chain. So it's not that sort of scenario of have you got 30,000 things which are all funneling up.
Okay. All right, I'll have a deeper look, but that at least helps me understand. Thank you.
Luigi, please.
Just to have a clear understanding. So we now have 700 that would be applicable for all value chain, whatever we rely, do not rely, use, do not use. And in addition, we have a like component treatment in case the sustainability assurance provider is performing directly the work. So we basically are reinstating the concept that even if we do not call it component, it is a component in this case. It is treated as a component because we are requiring the full independence.
No, it's the independence requirements that apply if the sustainability assurance practitioner chooses to carry out their own procedures in respect to the value chain. So that's only where that applies. But again, it's the same threshold that applies, which is just independence in accordance with Part 5 of the code.
No, I agree. We are treating this case as it was a component, basically. A component at which the audit work or the assurance work is performed.
Yes, if the sustainability assurance practitioner chooses to do that.
Okay, thank you. Ken, please.
Yeah, I would.
Helen also wants to.
I was just going to ask you, Mark, to what extent has the task force thought about this filter of materiality, whether it's individual materiality, collective across a range? I mean, I understand and I appreciate where you're heading on this to try to filter out the plethora of items you might end up coming up with. Is it the SASB's concept of materiality in connection with sustainability reporting? It's not financial statement reporting, though. I mean, you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of complexity that you could spend a lot of time talking about this filter.
It will depend ultimately, Galen, which reporting framework is being used for the sustainability reporting. So the example of material value chain reporting is set out in the IESBA standards, and that sets out a single level of materiality based on that engagement. However, other frameworks, like for instance the ESRS framework, uses dual materiality, but in a sense the decision is not one that the sustainability assurance practitioner is making on their own. It's actually the decision that's taken over materiality by the preparer of the sustainability information. And again, that will depend on the framework that they are using for reporting.
Thank you, Galen. Begoña?
I have a question mark about this discussion about the materiality you are now talking about. Why is the framework conditioning that? Because financial versus impact materiality is something, but now I understood that you were talking about the materiality of how material is the information of the value chain to be included or not. And this is regardless if you are talking about financial or impact materiality, right? So the frameworks don't condition if the information is relevant or not to be included because it might affect the decisions. That's my question.
Well, the frameworks do determine what gets reported, because if you use the IESBA standards as an example, they require material elements in the value chain to be reported. So in order to determine what was a material element for the purposes of reporting the value chain, you would use materiality as set out in the IESBA standard. If you were looking at reporting under CSRD, so you're using the ESRS, you would report on the value chain in accordance with the requirements in the CSRD and ESRS requirements. So it would depend on which framework you were using for the purposes of the reporting. And this is one of, and it is, as Galen said, a complexity, because you do have a lot of different reporting frameworks. And for instance, if you're reporting under, say, an ISO type framework, you have a very different level of understanding about what is material in the context of that type of engagement than you do under an ESRS or an IESBA type arrangement. However, what we've got is something that will work regardless of the framework that you use, because we have definitely been framework neutral in framing our independence requirements in that respect.
Thank you, Mark. Vanya, please.
Yeah, just complementing what Mark says. The question of materiality does not affect what IESBA is doing, or not even what IESBA is doing, because the framework that you'll be using, it will depend on the jurisdiction that you are and what the regulators chose to be used in that jurisdiction in the preparation of the report that will be then submitted to assurance and for fundamental principles of ethics. So in terms of IFRS, it will be the single materiality, and there is guidance in there on how to reach the notion of materiality, and the same for the European standards. So the standard for preparation is the one that will set the conditions for you to reach the concept of materiality.
Thank you very much, Vanya. Andy.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to, I appreciate the turnaround, the document that we could look at. I'm still processing it, and this isn't the time, it sounds like, for some of the critical concerns I have. But I do see that we're to get information early next week. I mean, I will do whatever I can to try to get behind this document and to give the feedback to the task force. But it is a tremendous chore here. So obviously I'm saying something that I'm sure you all appreciate. If we could have this information a week ago, early as we can in next week. I realize there's so much to do, but you're asking me for my approval a week from today, and I'm going to do what I can to do that. I can't promise anything that I could get across the finish line, but I also will be happy to do my best to integrate my schedule if anyone wants to interact with me, separately before next Friday as well. Even on times not convenient for me, I'll see what I can do.
Ken, please. Oh, Felicia?
Thank you, Chair. I also echo the concerns of Galen in terms of determining materiality and especially in relation to value chain reporting. And of course, this is not an easy topic, especially that you're talking about dual materiality, single materiality. And I think there's need to, I don't know whether I have a reference document or something that explains it better so that whoever's reading the code can easily interpret and maybe get some guidance. I don't know whether that is under a non-authoritative material that is going to come out. But I think, yes, some of us could have a better understanding than others, but I think there's need to give some guidance in terms of how do different assurance providers, service providers understand this concept of materiality, especially that even in audit itself, under normal circumstances, it's not easy to understand, but at least now it goes to, of course, sustainability reporting and assurance. There's need to give more clarity on this. I think that's something that maybe the board can be able to think about, and the working group, and then come up with some material that can be able to explain the concept better. I think that would be good.
So I think, Felician, it is actually really important that we don't go there, because what would we think if the ISSB chose to write an interpretation of how they believe the code should be interpreted? We wouldn't want that, because we set the code, and we wouldn't want somebody else saying, well, what IESBA means by this is this and this. Because materiality is in the context of the reporting framework. So if you want to understand materiality for an engagement carried out under ISSB standards, you have to read the ISSB standards and the guidance and implementation material that the ISSB are developing. Similarly, if you're reporting under another framework, you need to read that framework and any guidance that they've issued around materiality. And likewise, if you're the assurance provider and you're using ISSA 5000, you need to read ISSA 5000 and the guidance that the IAASB have put out in respect of materiality. But materiality is just a fact of what is reported through the value chain. It is not an issue for the code, but it is something that's important to remember because it determines what's in the value chain. And one of the things that we need to make sure that our stakeholders are aware of is that when we engage with them to talk about value chain reporting, it is not every last thing in the value chain. That is the relevant issue. But I don't think it's the job of this board to provide guidance over materiality and what it means. It is the job of the board or the organisation that sets the framework for reporting, and also for the IAASB or any other assurance standard providers who provide that in the context of what they do. And that's a really important thing that we shouldn't lose sight of.
Maybe just to clarify a little bit, I didn't say that we need to define materiality. It's just that we need to give more, like what you're saying, Mark, just to say if you're using a particular framework, then you're going to determine that materiality based on that framework. I think maybe if you could get some non-authoritative material that exactly gives guidance in terms of where you've put it, so that people can know that if you're using, let's say, ISSB, then you have to go to ISSB framework, something like that, not necessarily being particular in the code.
And it may be that that's a paragraph within the EM that we consider, but we'll have to do it through that lens. All right.
So Mark, that explanation was very helpful for me because it does two things. And when I think about EM1, it helps people put a fence around this volume issue that they're very worried about, right? And I think that's actually very important to draw out in the EM, because otherwise everybody's saying every supplier that's ever been out there. So that's one important point. The second point is it helps you, and I'm going to speak in layman's terms, it helps you figure out when you have to apply this independence stuff to those suppliers. What is the list? And then you go into the code and it tells you what to do. Am I right? That's what I heard you say, which was very regulatory speak, but I'm trying to be a little more layman's. So how big is the volume and what do you do when you have someone on the list? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Laurie. Ken, I think you're the next one.
Thank you very much, Chair Gabriel. I just had three points I wanted to raise with the board. First of all, on the matter of materiality there and Felicia's suggestion for more guidance, I would just draw the board's attention to the FAQ that IESBA has issued that provides further explanations around the application of materiality in the assurance context. So I would be very careful that the board does not duplicate that work. That FAQ, in fact, if you go to the IESBA's website, you will find it straight there. It was issued literally in October, so 6 weeks ago. So there is the guidance there already. And if anybody wishes to understand how the concept of materiality operates in an assurance context, and in particular in the context of draft ISA 5000, well, it's there. My second point is that we need to understand and also be careful that we are not suggesting that the approach to independence for value chain entities in section 5407 is the same as the approach for component entities or components. They are very different. The approach that we have, that our workstream has developed in section 5407 is very proportionate, precisely because of the context in which we are thinking about value chain entities. If one were to compare sections 5405 versus section 5407, these are very different sections. Section 5405 addressing the use of component sustainability assurance firms in a group assurance context is very prescriptive. It's a lot more detailed. It deals with issues of even the engagement team at the component level being dependent and which independence requirements ought to apply. It deals with the identification of key leaders within the sustainability assurance team at the component level and which requirements they need to comply with. It deals even with the communication of breaches at the component level and how those breaches have been addressed in the group assurance context. And there's nothing like this in section 5407. So this is not the same. This is very different. It's a lighter touch, but it is a very proportionate approach. And my third point really is absolutely in the explanatory memorandum, there will be a question as to whether stakeholders have views, perspectives on section 5700. But that question needs to be put in context, and this was discussed also at the board, I think, earlier this week. That needs to be put in the context of perhaps one or two scenarios, and maybe only one scenario is needed to truly explain, really make it very clear what sort of threats this section will be addressing when it comes to interest, relationships, or circumstances involving the firm, the reporting firm, and the value chain entity. And that sort of scenario, that sort of example is very important so that stakeholders understand why the board is proposing this section in the sustainability assurance independence standards. So I just want to make sure that we cover those, and importantly, we understand the context in which we're addressing value chain entities.
Thank you very much, Ken. Galen?
Come back briefly. Mark, I think your points were very well made. I wasn't suggesting that we would be defining materiality either in the context of the standard setter, the external standard setter, or the IAASB, as Ken has just mentioned. But whenever I hear the word materiality, I think in terms of filter or exception. And I think the board does have to deal with exceptions to the code. So that was the context from whence I was coming.
And I think Galen, it sort of really picks up on Laurie's comment about, okay, what's my list? what gets caught. So we need to have something in the EM that makes it clear that there is a list of what gets caught, but the list is not everything. It's actually the significant, well, the material items, as Vanya has confirmed as well. So we'll have to make sure that that's clear.
Thank you very much, Mark. Are there any other questions or comments on this? Rania, please.
So my only question is, when are we going to be, which meeting will be discussing this, next Wednesday or Friday?
Friday.
Friday. Have you circulated? I'm sorry, I'm behind on my emails. Have you circulated the update?
We circulated this, so there's three sections, but we will circulate the entire independent standards early next week, including the proposed changes that we picked up based on the comments received.
Okay, Mark and Sylvia. Okay. Vanya.
Just a very brief comment to express my support for what we've done. As we discussed at the beginning at the first session, I think it makes simpler when you isolate things instead of trying to deal with them all together. And so people start thinking if this concept apply to this as well or not, and then you isolated it in a different session. I think it makes pretty much sense, and it will be easier for everyone to follow what you intend. Just to express my support on that.
Thank you very much, Vanya. Mark, all done. So thank you very much to the board members for these final comments. Mark, you were aiming at having a less than 30-minute session, but yeah, it was not the case, but we have to do what we have to do. Thank you very much for providing the board with this anticipated opportunity to comment on this section, because this is going to make our life easier next week. And with this, we are almost about to come to the end of the public's in-person session. But before that, we still have something important to do, which is to say a proper farewell to the board members, TAs, Galen, who are going to leave us in a way, while we know that they stay in any case. And yes, and we have some special gifts. Yeah, and gifts and certificates to the TAs and board members and to Galen. And so without without taking more time out, Jens Engelhardt was a TA of this board since 2018, if I'm not wrong. Member of the tax planning task force.
No.
Sorry, of the E-Code, and providing support to Jens. Well, thank you very much. So now CR1 it's not here, but I'm going to give it to thank you very much. Since 2021, I think. Kemisha Sani, I think that Kemisha is observing the meeting online. At least I saw her face somewhere. So Kemisha, thank you very much for the wonderful support provided to finally, Chris Panganimana. Okay. Thank you very much to the technical advisors who are leaving us for this very good contribution over the years. And now we are moving forward with the board members. Yao Shu, you're the first one. Thank you very much. So. Thank you very much. Yasu, I don't know if you want to say 2 words to the board before we close from your. Thank you. And sorry.
Thank you, Gabriela. Thank you, everybody. And this is the first and the last meeting for me in prison. Yeah, 3 years and the virtual meeting, and I think it's hard for me, and I think it's also hard for everybody. And I'm very happy I can attend this. This is my last meeting, and all of this, yeah, very wonderful this present. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it's been an honor working on this board with all of you, with the board members, with the TAs, the staff, and it's been a great learning for me. So thank you very much for all your support. I think one word about the staff. I think all of you are just fantastic human beings, dedicated, committed, hardworking. I mean, I used to tell Carla and Cam that when we finish our work and go back, at times your work starts even after that. So you guys keep on working, and I think my personal view is that we as a board, if we have been successful in a number of projects, I think the staff has played a very crucial part in that. So thank you very much. Last, I was talking to Ken a few days back. This place, I think, has become a second home for me. Made many friends. So I will miss a lot of things. But I think life goes on. So all the very best to all of you. And do stay in touch. Thank you very much.
What a day. Like my colleagues have mentioned, it's been an honor, privilege to be here. It's been a good experience, learning, interacting, but most especially staff. When I look at the board papers that are prepared, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I think it tells you the kind of work that is done by the staff and of course the support of the board. It's been an honor. And I think having been here for 2 years and seeing some of the projects that have gone by, of course, standards that have been approved, ET, GA, the tax planning, now technology-related provisions, and now the other EDs that are out, it shows that IESBA is in good hands. And with all the work that goes in behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, I can only wish you all the best. And I think one thing I'm going to carry is that I'm going to be a very good ambassador of IESBA. Now that you also gave me the jacket, I think it's going to, it's going to be on me for many years to come. I can only wish you all the best and hope to see you again, either here or anywhere else. And I'll endeavor to attend most of the events that happen in Africa as part of the continuation of the job. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your friendship, for your professionalism. It was a great pleasure and a privilege to work with all of you, not only the 6 years as board member, but also 2 years as TA. So thank you to Gary, to whom I was the TA, and he taught me a lot. Thank you to you, Jens, for supporting me. Thank you to all of you in the task force, the staff. I must mention Carla, especially. Thank you for supporting us in this task force in tax planning. But I don't want to leave anyone out. All of you made this experience of being member of this board as one of the highlights of my professional life. Thank you.
Well, I guess I have a chance to get in a few final words to this August group, and would really repeat some of the things that I've heard, and that's privilege, honor. What a wonderful experience to be able to serve as your CAG chair for the last 4 years. I was a member of the CAG for a total of 13 years, and for the last 4 years is CAG chair. I'm going to have a new life after this. My wife reminds me of that on a regular basis. I'm not particularly good at change and goodbyes, especially with people that I've learned I really have respected from the beginning, but have gotten to know all of you around the room and the activities that we've had over the last 4 years, and certainly even the pandemic that we struggled through. I'll step forward to be an ambassador, and I think we all need to be ambassadors, whether we're on the board now or later, and be welcoming challenges to bring the board's work forward so that we can, in our own individual jurisdictions, be supportive of where this great effort is going. I'll be watching in particular some of these projects as they move forward, especially the governance and culture project. I think it's important. I'm glad to hear that there's other standard setters that are looking at it. I think it will make a difference in quality of the work that PAs do around the world. I'm very passionate about this stuff. I'd like to especially thank Gabriela for the support that she has given me, and Ken as well, the staff, Astu and Jeff and Carla over the last couple years. They're just terrific people, and they've taken care of me. But thank you very much, and yeah, goodbye.
So thank you. I'm going to sit. Thank you to all of you. I'm not going to say much more. This is the moment of those who are moving on to other spaces and other chapters. But of course, before we close this in-session person, we want to say another proper goodbye with some additional elements of celebration, not only of what we have already approved this week, which is a lot, incredibly amount of approvals and of progress. I will not take long. This is not the final part of our meeting. We still have a few things to do next week, so I will reserve my final comments for next week. But of course, the moment here today is to very specially thank the ones who provided us over the years with this amazing contribution. We will miss you a lot. You will stay very much with us, and in everything that we will do and be doing and providing. Thank you very much. And the session is not yet closed because we still need to do something.
I am feeling teary-eyed. No, this is a wonderful moment for everyone, and especially for me, having worked with all of you, and I know I've worked with some of you for a bit longer than others, but I think you're all part of my family, and you're part of you're in our hearts, as Gabriel has said, and yes, I will remember all of you for basically all the wonderful moments we've spent together, but importantly in the board itself, when we've had so many challenging, interesting, difficult conversation at time, but at times, but all again with that focus on the public interest. And I think you've all demonstrated that you have nothing closer to your heart than the public interest, and that's wonderful. So we will miss you all, but it's not quite farewell yet, because I know that we will be crossing each other in person or in the ether, this thing called the internet, and through its many channels, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. And of course, we are only a phone call away, or a short message away. So thank you very much for all the board members, technical advisors, and Galen as well, who will be leaving us. It is farewell, but not quite goodbye. Thank you.
Okay, I think that all of us have now the champagne, the bubble. So I'm going to propose a toast to the 3 approvals this week. I'd say 4, because we have to include the project plan that we also approved. So it's 4 and not 3, and very important. But above all, a toast, a very emotional toast to those who are going to leave us. Thank you very much once again for everything. Cheers. 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 And all the best to all of you. Laurie? Cheers. 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 Yeah.
13 years, my goodness. I didn't realize. All right. I have alcohol at lunchtime. There's no recovery for the rest of the day.
Bottoms up. Bottoms up, yeah.
Well, sorry. I just want to make everybody aware that the in-person public session is closed. We will reconvene next week online, but for today it's over as a public session. We will reconvene after lunch for the executive session. Thank you very much. So just one additional note, 1:30. Nobody who listens to me. 1:30, we'll be back. Okay?
Lunch is served and we'll reconvene for the executive session at 1:30. Planning committee, if planning committee could meet in the green room for a brief get together.
What I can tell you is that's not it. Well, not such a great,
Are we still targeting to finish at 2?
Oh yes.